How to achieve gender equality. To think that even gender equality promoters don't have a good solution other than relying on propaganda, brainwashing, the goodwill of people, shaming people for being evil, lofty ideals, etc. Essentially trying to make people think like them and hope that that will magically solve the issue. Oh, of course there's also a bit of law-making. These things aren't a solution though, but merely countermeasures that don't get the job done. I, however, have a much better, as in a more permanent, solution, and it's actually a very science and reality-friendly approach. It won't replace those other things, but it will stop them from being handicapped. Before I get onto my solution to the problem, one that should be possible in theory, I will ask you to listen with an open mind, as this proposal isn't your most orthodox way of tackling the issue. You see, their problem is that they're trying to change people by teaching them how to behave, just like parents do their children. But anyone who has ever raised a child would know that child won't behave themselves indefinitely no matter how much you tell them to. Sure, for a time they may, but after a while they usually fall back into their bad habits and over time even pick up other bad or even worse ones, even if the old ones go away. All people are different, of course, but that also applies to the people in our case. Clearly there are still too many troublemakers out there despite all your efforts. I, on the other hand, know that the only way to make gender equality a reality is to literally make people's gender equal or remove them completely, by making humanity into a sex and gender-free race. The logic is the following: you can't discriminate against anyone based on their gender, if all have the same gender or genders don't exist in the first place, right? I'm such a genius, I know. The problem though, is that there's only some very major hindrances to this. You see, compared to what some lefters, feminists or whatever they're called these days might have told you or made you believe, human society kind of need there to be male and female humans. It simply isn't possible to make people gender neutral and or gender and sexless today anyway. But even if we could, humanity would go extinct if we did, as all people currently have a limited lifespan and we have no artificial way to make new people that doesn't require humans. But wait, what if we had a way to do that? Now that's something right there. Then evolution would take care of all genders not being the same. I mean, if sexuality and gender becomes obsolete, evolution would take its course and remove it from humanity by means of natural selection, as that whole concept otherwise is pretty much only a burden to humanity. Yes, you heard me right. If you don't believe me, just take a look at the sexless and gender-neutral ant and bee workers and compare them to humans and other sexual hormone-driven animals, and you can clearly see which type is more appropriate to be members of the peaceful, harmonic, productive and synergetic society we are trying to create, and which ones are full of internal conflicts and lazy and parasitic individuals whose greatest adversary are the people they live side by side with and who can never achieve peace. You see, the reason humanity has never achieved true peace is because they're biologically hardwired, especially individuals with high testosterone levels, to always fight with each other. And they never will. I repeat, they will never, ever achieve it. Unless that changes, period. And wait, that's quite the evolutionary advantage, right? That people can actually focus on other important matters other than having to constantly watch over their shoulders and be on their guard against other people all the time, right? There are more than this, but this should be a good enough reason to prove that sexuality and gender will disappear over time when they're no longer needed. But what would need to be done to make this happen? Well, we would need an artificial womb that could replace the one normally used for the human development stages before birth, namely the one found in women. We would also need a way to get our hands on an artificial source of embryonic stem cells and be able to modify them accordingly to enable us to change the course of human evolution in our preferred direction, as well as get enough genetic diversity, etc. To create that source of embryonic stem cells, one can start it off by taking them from people. So after an artificial source of that has been established, humans wouldn't be needed in the process anymore, and so the reproductive parts of humans would become obsolete. We would also need to develop a baby formula or something like that which could completely replace breast milk and not just complement it. Doing so would replace the need for women to breastfeed babies using their own body, and so even the breast part would evolve to become the same for all humans or even disappear completely. There's also another thing that's required after this would be implemented, and that is that all natural forms of these things must cease being used. That should probably not be too difficult. But let me just make myself clear that if people don't transition to those artificial methods and stop using the old natural ones, they won't change. In that case, the work put in would be all for nothing. So one would also have to make people accept the transition. It's probably something you people can figure out yourselves though. Now this of course also has to become economically and practically viable. So economics and science are going to have to work their magic for a while to make all this practically doable. But after all that, the need for all gender and sexual traits would become obsolete and therefore be discarded by evolution over time as they're no longer necessary and sooner or later disappear from humanity. Or perhaps rather said, the next evolved version of humans, as maybe the descendants of humans at that time could no longer be classified as humans. Sure, it may take quite a while, but at least those oppressive, abusive and unpleasant behavioral traits you all hate, that were the original motive for the gender equality movement, would disappear a lot sooner, as those only require minor changes to human beings in comparison to those other physical changes. If one still thinks that things are going too slow, one can always invent something that can speed up this process. What exactly that something is though, other than something that modifies the human body, is something I can't tell you. At that time these things would be permanently fixed and solved by default. Isn't that great? As I said, all people would then not only be socially and legally equal but literally equal when it comes to gender, and gender inequality would be gone for good. Well, among humans anyway. Now even if this whole thing might seem a bit odd and strange, it's not like it's theoretically impossible or anything like that, and it can be the answer to solving this problem and also many other issues. But those other things it can solve are topics for other videos. The question now arises if those people supporting gender equality are going to stay true to their cause and support a development such as this that can actually practically solve their problems. I suppose this could be a chance to see how genuine you really are, all you social justice warriors. The end.